How you doing? Welcome to the 61st episode of the Interstice podcast. Going live, going hard. Big shout out as usual to everyone who supports me on Patreon. Thank you so much. If you haven't done so already and you really enjoy the podcast, please do consider supporting me there for as little as $1. What to jump into immediately here? I have this book I'm reading right now, or I should say that I'm returning to right now, because I was reading it and then I was like, you know what? I got my buddy Sandro, and it was his birthday. And I like getting people books for their birthdays. It's not always that it makes sense, and it's not always that people read them. But sometimes, if people do, I have some good recommendations. And I chose for him. There's this incredible series called the Discworld series by Terry Pratchett. I've talked about him lots on the podcast before. And Terry Pratchett, prior to what is her name? J.K. Rowling. He was the most popular author for fantasy in the UK. And he's amazing. He wrote over 40 books. There's actually, maybe I just go on a big tangent talking about Terry Pratchett for a little bit. After I get to these points, after what I'm going to say, I'll return to him because he's a really, really fascinating person, and maybe I could point you in the direction of something you might enjoy of his, not necessarily a book. His books are amazing. I love them. It's one of the few times that when I've read something, I don't read a lot of funny books. There's humor in good books that I read, but they're not usually seen as a comedy, whereas his are. They're like humanist comedies, so there's like a lot of heart, but it's foundationally, they're comedies. So I thought it would be cool to get Sandro the first book in the series, because for Christmas he had gotten me Murakami, and he got me Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World, which was such a cool book. Definitely started kind of medium, we'll say, in terms of my interest and my enjoyment of it. But then as I progressed through it, it's one of the most enjoyable reads I've ever had. It's amazing. He deserves the praise that he gets. He's not an overhyped author. Anyways, I got him that. And when I went to get him that book for his birthday, sorry, not for his birthday, for Christmas. No, it was for his birthday. When I went in there, I saw on the shelf that there was this other book there that was one that my friends had read, and I've talked about it before in the podcast, and I thought, hey, maybe I'll check it out. And it started very, very strong, and it was absolute dog shit, but I like to finish books. There was like, what was another one that I had read, which was brutal for me. It was the Satanic Verses by Salman Rushdie. Like, just shows like I'm a dum-dum, because I know that book got him in so much trouble when he wrote it. And for the life of me, when I read it, I was like, so how has he alluded to the Quran or whatever it is that has gotten the jihad put out on his name? I couldn't understand. I'm a dum-dum. I'm sure a Google search would clear that up in a heartbeat, but we'll not do that now. I finished that book, mercifully, recently. And so I returned to this other book, and it's called Anti-Fragile. And this one actually has a ton of humor in it, and it's basically a very, very long discussion of institutions or people who are able to experience difficult times and come out of it ahead. I think that's the best way to put it without like laboring the point, to make it straightforward. And there were a couple of concepts that came out just in the last little bit of reading that I did that was really, really cool. Two of them particularly that I liked before we returned to Terry Pratchett, because I think, yeah, that'll be sweet to talk about. One of them, somewhere in my life I've heard this term before, but this was the first time to see it again. And the term is Hormesis, Hormesis, Hormesis. And it's this idea that if you low dose people with toxins, we're not saying like something that is arsenic or something, but like certain types of toxins, if you introduce low doses to the human body, that it actually strengthens the human body. And I'm always so curious about these kind of concepts where in breaking ourselves down, we make ourselves stronger. And there's been a lot of that in my life recently, and where it would be easy to come out the other end of that just feeling like, oh, I'm only broken. You can, with another perspective and scientific evidence, suggest to yourself, suggest to however many voices you have in your head, that maybe this could be a good thing if I only approach it in a certain way. And so the idea of hormesis was really, really interesting to me, because a lot of how I talk about you got to get back up, life gives you lemons, you make lemonade, this kind of thing, a lot of it kind of exists in the realm of philosophy, like a love of wisdom, a talk, a sort of cerebral exercise. But that's all fine and well, but a lot of it can become woo, this like the just homeopathic medicine, or like these things that are not scientifically based, and it's more from someone's feelies that they just felt a certain way. And so I try and balance that. Like, I would love to see that the things that I believe in, say philosophically, for example, could also have a grounding in scientific evidence. And so to see we have that with hormesis was really, really cool. I like that idea. It was very interesting to me. Additionally, the next concept, he goes like 1-2 at this this portion of it. He talks about, everybody has heard of post-traumatic stress, right? Like we've all heard of that. Post-traumatic stress, something horrible happens to you, and then you are not able, or perhaps through therapy or something other than that, you are able to get past the stress afterwards, but it is something that lingers with you. If you added D on the end there, PTSD, then you have post-traumatic stress disorder, and a lot of people have this, who've been through like really, really brutal experiences. I think most classically it would be somebody who's gone through like a war setting. You see some shit and that messes with you. The human mind, like very clearly, because we have this, again, scientific evidence of it in these cases of how screwed up people are, that it really messes with us. We're not supposed to commit massive violence. That's not good for the human brain, turns out, unsurprisingly. And he kind of turned, and this just reminded me of another thing I want to talk about. This is good, because this was going to be, I wanted almost purposely to come into this one. Usually I make a little, like a list of notes that I could talk about things, but this time I had hormesis and the thing I'm discussing now, and then I have nothing. So we'll see where this goes. And I just got a couple, so this is cool. So what he talked about was, as opposed to post-traumatic stress, and he says that there is a body of science for this in this book that I was reading, this Anti-Fragile, he says post-traumatic growth. I was like, well, without even going into the scientific evidence regarding that, that's a concept I could get behind. That makes a real practical sense to me, because whether you like it or not, that's often what happens. Like I'm not experiencing that right now. For the gold example I'd probably use is a relationship. People who have been in a significant relationship and it comes to an end, you have a lot of post-traumatic stress because this person was entwined with you. They very much defined your world. But you've got to move on. Life doesn't care. Life is both mercilessly and mercifully forcing you forwards. It's just, that's the way it goes. And so a lot of people, when faced with that, it's like, oh, well, I guess I just like stay in my room forever and I'm just sad boy forever, or sad girl. Eventually you got to get out that door, and then you experience usually quite an explosion of growth after that, because you realize the thing that you should know the whole time is that your life was never reliant on that person. It is enriched by that person, but you have the potential. There are no limits to you. You might notice that afterwards. So that's like the classic example that you have from like a relationship. But then, of course, you get that with all sorts of things. And I like to apply that as I think of myself and these things that are happening now. I can't get overexcited about it at all. But since I've gone through this recently, it has awoken in me. It has made clear to me again the sort of path that I need to take. Also with the help of good conversations with great friends to kind of like, what do we do? How do we move forward? What do we do? But I really feel some excitement afterwards, where I think definably now, where before I was going through all this like crazy trauma stress, that now I'm clearly, I've stepped into another, say, period in my life where I would call it like explosive growth. Like what I like to do, interestingly enough, my phone must be listening to me because I saw McConaughey. All right, guy. He was talking about the same thing that I like to do. You won't see this if you're listening to it, but I always like to give a shout out to making to-do lists and also having a little fun with them. So when I make a to-do list, I try and do them in order of priority of whatever it is that I'm going to do in a day. I go back and forth. I use the Google Calendar, but there's something tactile about making a to-do list that I really, really like. And it's often easier than going in and making a list in my phone or something. I can just do it very, very quickly. It's efficient. And I do this when I'm at my best, when I'm doing my best. And it is so, so satisfying. You write down what you're going to do in order of priority. And also, McConaughey, he was saying this as well. And I was like, oh, yeah, this lines up with what my thinking was in regards to this as well. You also put tons of things on it that are not necessarily do or die. Let's say you put fun things on it, is what he said. And I was like, that's true. And easy things that you wouldn't even have to really think about. Like I'm trying to not drink so much coffee these days because, oh man, do I have a strong reaction to caffeine, it turns out. You put on anything. You would put on, for example, have a cup of coffee. And there is this incredible dopamine drip that you get from just being able to check off anything that you have marked in your brain as to do. And so you go through the day basically getting all these success moments and milestones. And the point that I bring this up, I was like, oh, this is a great idea for anybody who's like maybe looking for a little bit of a life hack in terms of upping their productivity. But I've been on fire. I've been on absolute fire, and it's been incredible. And something that I've talked about as well in the podcast before is that immediately notable, and I knew this would happen, as soon as I start doing this and I start expanding and aspiring and creating more again, I expand. I'm able to edit more. I'm able to journal more. I'm able to write in the blog on my website more. I'm able to collaborate with people more. You find that it isn't as though you are reaching an energy ceiling above you as you do this kind of thing, but you are actually raising the roof. You're raising the roof on what it is you're capable of doing. And so when I said, I thought it was just an interesting thing. I mean, I think this book is actually like incredibly appropriate now. Before, when I started reading it, I didn't have this sort of tectonic shift in my life going on, but now that I do, it's incredibly relevant to return to. And when he said hormesis and post-traumatic growth, I was like, yeah, these are two concepts that I could really get behind. Which has been, it's been a blast. I definitely noted I can't do it eternally, kind of taking stock of my physical and mental state. I've done 3 days. This is the 4th day. I got up, I did my usual stuff. I went to the gym, and I got through like maybe a fifth of a workout, and I just had to call it. Like, I don't think today is not a depressed day, but it's the energy levels are low, and that's something to stay objective of. And so I'm still going to make my list after this podcast. In fact, I should have done it before, because I would have loved checking off that I had done the podcast. I still can. There's a lot to do after this, because I got to rip the video and render it and everything. I'm still putting it on the list. I'm still checking it off. This has been great. This is seeing it in the book, seeing it in my life. I was like, yeah, post-traumatic growth. I like this concept. I want to talk about it with people on my podcast, and with several people who probably don't want to have to listen to me say it to them, but I will. Another concept I wanted to talk about, now I'm like moving back. I'm actually able to remember these things, it was something that I saw on Reddit recently that was crazy. I think I'd seen it once before, and this harkens back to the idea of us discussing PTSD. So we didn't know this. This is interesting. Let's just do like an interesting discussion of history a little bit here, because that's my jam. I love history. It's all stories. Stories are fun. So there was a period of time when people were engaging with violence in a very, very different way than we do now, because it was a matter of technology and scale. Big, big deal. And so, because the scale was smaller, well, I'm certain there was still post-traumatic stress in these times. You could not see the same violent acts that you would see in the modern context. This will all make sense. This will all follow forward to this. I'm not even at the Reddit thing yet, but I want to give the historical context for this first. So, if you had people facing off in medieval battle, I'm sure if I went back, you should listen to some Dan Carlin podcasts if you like hardcore history. He's amazing. Love his stuff. He would talk about the numbers of people in like medieval combat, and I don't know them. I don't know them off the top of my head. But even if you had big numbers, let's say you've got like 1,000 archers, 1,000 mounted cavalry, 1,000 footmen, you've got all this. Maybe your army's even like 20,000 people. The rate at which you can inflict violence is just not the same as a machine gun, is it? And so humankind's sense of battle, because it was very personal, right? Like a lot of it, if you weren't an archer, the way that it happened, it was very up close. It was very gritty, and you might say in that way then it was more brutal because you had to personally do it. I'm thinking of the movie now, The Duel, which is an underappreciated gem, which pretty sure Ridley Scott was really pissed off. It did really badly. I haven't even finished it yet. I really, really want to. But, you know, taking somebody out with a mace, spiked mace, a Morning Star, whatever it's called, that's going to leave you with a little bit of stress. But the scale of it again, I mean, if you're whacking in a day, you can probably take out, maybe you're a juggernaut and you take out like 200 people in a day. That might be glorious for you, maybe a little bit traumatic. But again, the scale of that is pared down compared to the modern context. And so, also in terms of reporting, nobody goes back to the medieval castle and then says, oh, it was, you wouldn't believe the violence. Also, these people at that period of time, we're talking like medieval period, nobody lived that long. So seeing the sort of neurological damage that would be caused, nobody would even be aware of. There's all these reasons that we would not see early on the sort of impact that warfare has on the human psyche. We couldn't be aware of it. And then we have it's this sort of testing your mettle, this kind of thing where it's personal, it's one-on-one, it's gritty. Not always would I say that it's fair, but maybe there is some sense of like martial combat being fair because it's two guys with a sword or whatever it might be. Very, very, very skill and physically based kind of thing that's happening. And then you move forward in time where the scale of these battles and the rate at which you can inflict violence is increasing and increasing. It's to the point where you think about people who are using, like just even to move to gun warfare. That completely revolutionized Japan. That's like one of the great unifying factors in Japan was that, I'm not sure, maybe Oda Nobunaga? I watched this really crazy thing recently. It's on Netflix. It's a great series where Oda Nobunaga, Tokugawa Ieyasu, and then like one other guy who I thought were like separate entities in the timeline, they all came together to unite the country. And a large part of their success was based on incorporating weapons like the musket into their warfare. And that ramped up the rate at which you could inflict violence, the scale in which violence could be inflicted on. But still, when you looked at using one of these weapons, it took minutes to reload. So you've scaled up, you're able to do things far more efficiently than you did before, but there's still limitations on this. And then finally, this was really this, like, maybe it's one of the reasons I most there were just points in my education when I was like, oh, that history is so interesting, and I'm an absolute moron when it comes to mathematics and anything like that. So maybe that's why I was like, oh, history would be interesting to study. We came to the point where we were talking about the First World War, and we'll soon arrive to the initial point that I was going to talk about. And the First World War was truly the first time that you had, call it, modernized warfare, modernized, mechanized warfare, which included artillery, which included machine guns, which included chemical weapons in the form of mustard gas. And all of a sudden, in terms of how much we could scale up the rate at which you could kill and also just annihilate people en masse in, like, I guess that's the same thing. The rate at which you could kill people and how you could kill them went to a whole totally different level. Like the sort of military, bombardment, what is that called? Artillery bombardment, what that could do to people, what the machine gun could do to people. I don't want to get too macabre in details here, but also mustard gas, like what that would do to people. And we were blowing people up like I said before about the Morning Star. Maybe you are an absolute beast and you take out so many people in a single day with the Morning Star, but with the machine gun, you could take down, if you had a couple machine guns, you could take down 1,000 people like in a heartbeat. Nothing. They just run up over the trenches, ga 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 ga, and they're done. And they're dead. And here comes another, and they're dead. Like the rate at which people were dying, and in brutal, like torn to pieces by these machine guns, torn to pieces by the artillery bombardment, melted by the mustard gas. That's some trauma like humankind had never had before. And also, you were seeing medicine progress to a point that people were now living longer. They were not so often dying from their teeth, which is, turns out, what we died a lot from. Oh man, just thinking of that, getting some infected tooth. Like, I've had the agony of wisdom teeth. We could circle around back to that. I should tell you that story. Random horrible stories. But we'll finish this. Yeah, people are getting wiped out. And they had, what it was called back then was shell shock. And these were guys who were coming back from the First World War who had PTSD, but we didn't know what to call it at that time. And so we called it shell shock. And people were, they could link it together a little bit, right? They were like, oh, okay. You went and you saw how many people die in a single moment, torn to pieces by a machine gun? Do you think that was a upsetting moment for you? That kind of thing. And I saw on Reddit, I've never seen this before. This shows I'm a little bit ignorant for a guy who's like into cameras. I'm very ignorant, actually. Let's be accurate here. I saw video footage, it was even colorized, of people who had returned to the war, returned from the war, the First World War, with shell shock. And of course, it goes without saying, it was just incredibly sad, but it was, as well, it was fascinating. It was just fascinating to see that period of life, because I guess this is, did the First World War end 1917, roughly? I think. I'll check after this. Let's see how accurate or inaccurate I was to say that. There was like I said, there was a modernizing of technology. Like when you think the 80s, really, boom, that's when it hit up. And actually so much. There was an acceleration occurring at this time, the Industrial Revolution and all that kind of stuff. But it was wild seeing the outfits that people are wearing. Also, I think it was people could understand that this was obviously it was a mental disorder. They're not right in the head. They're like misbehaving. They're reacting, like they're freaking out to everything. But you could also see in the people observing them a lack of knowledge. Like they were more looking at these people like or at least my impression was they were more looking at them like it was a carnival show. Like, look at this curiosity, these interesting people. I'm sure through time, I think there's like universal compassion. I think people were able to see at that time as well. Just people with a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of basic compassion would be like, it's because they watched 3,000 people get murdered next to them in like 2 minutes, right? Like that shouldn't be so hard for us to understand. But then a lot of that's just not in some people's orbit. They don't get it. It's so interesting to see that footage. I wonder if you could still find it. If you could search, probably on YouTube, like shell shock victims of World War I. And I can recommend if you do want to see it without. There's nothing really graphic about it. It is more just a what would you call it? A sort of, I don't know, a historical artifact that you can watch it now. But rest assured, it reminds us how absolutely horrendous war is. I think of what was it? I had some good expressions, like speak frequently about my buddy Sandro. He had a good one when we were talking together where he said, like, if you've drawn your sword, you've already lost. And I was like, oh, I like that. I like that. It sounds very like Sun Tzu's Art of War, that kind of thing. Interesting stuff. I like that. The First World War is an example of where, we got all this brand new technology. What happens when we use it to kill people? Oh, okay. Oh, that's not good. Maybe we should be more responsible about that. You can also, let's just rest there for a moment to think about the people who, I know, like, in my lifetime, there's been some tough times, there's like housing crises, bank bailouts, pandemics, all of these kind of things. But say, for example, you are 20 at the end of the First World War, 1917. And then 2736 is the beginning of the Second World War. So 20, 30, 40, they need every able-bodied man. You could potentially have to fight in 2 world wars where the only difference between the two is that, again, our efficiency in killing has increased and the scale of the violence is on a broader scale. Like, man, you gotta wonder what's. I think you would, in looking at that, you can understand people being jaded, feeling as though there was the senselessness to the universe. You'd be like, come on, like you think there's order to this? It's chaos. It's pure chaos. It's rough. And not to use the suffering of others to kind of contextualize my life in a much brighter light, but I think that's inevitable. It's useful. It's useful to do because that is wild. How blessed is my life? How lucky I am is it's insane. I'm sure there'll be another person. I don't know if we'll even do podcasts. What form will it take 20 years from now? But probably somebody saying that of their experience then, if we're still around and we haven't blown the planet up. They're like, no, like, you think it's tough now? No, we fixed climate change. Now I'm just whatever. I don't know if this is reality because I went into VR and it was equivalent in graphical fidelity. So now when I left VR, I don't know if this is real anymore. Maybe that's a worse problem. I'm not sure. But interesting to consider. So I thought it would be cool. As I said, like I'm jumping around all over the place, but this feels casual, feels cool. I wanted to talk a little bit more about Terry Pratchett. So Terry Pratchett, in his books, if you haven't read them, they are a universe that contains within it consistent characters, but they're not always connected together. So, for example, there's Ankh-Morpork, which is the main city, and there's Atuan, which is like the turtle, which is the universe, which everything rests on top of. It is flat Earth ideology, for sure. It's, one of the best jokes. I love this. he talks about how there's this discussion of actually it was all of these sea turtles floating through the ether that met each other. They had sex, and then it birthed the rest of the universe, and he called it the Big Bang. And I was like, come on, that's gold. That's gold, because they're fucking, right? The Big Bang. Oh man, that was actually in the one that I was reading, the one that I gave to Sandro. I was like reading him the beginning of it. I was just hanging out at his house, reading a little bit, and that joke I'd forgotten. It's gold. He was so smart. He's passed away now. I talk about these characters because the characters that comprise his universe, because everyone ends up having favorites. Everybody likes, like there's Rincewind, and Rincewind is this like beleaguered, he's basically the not anti-hero, like he's a bad guy, but he's not successful. He's got what allows him to succeed is his heart. He's got a good heart, and that carries him through things. But if you want to talk about his skill as a mage or as a wizard or whatever, he's horrible, he's clumsy, he's not very good at it. Actually, that's how all of the good characters, which makes them highly likable, is that they're usually accomplishing things by heart. He doesn't have characters that are really, really good at what they do. Unless they're evil. Sometimes they're incredibly skilled if they're evil. So, my favorite character, getting on to the point that I'm going to talk about, the best one, by far, is Death. Death is reoccurring through the whole thing. Death has some of the sweetest wisdom bombs that gets dropped, and Death is highly humanistic. It's interesting. Well, he embodies like the void and everything that Death is supposed to symbolically embody. He is as well incredibly humanistic and relatable, and loves cats. That's one of Death's pet peeves, is that he does his job regardless of like whether a person was good or bad. But if somebody hurts animals, he hates them. And I was like, oh, that's a really interesting detail to do with Death. And I was actually introduced, this was a cool like back then forwards, or forwards and back, whatever you want to call it, becoming aware of like who Terry Pratchett was I was given a graphic novel when I was young, and it was called Mort, as in like mortify, as in death. And it was a graphic novel about Death wanting to get out on vacation, and so he got this apprentice. I may have talked about this in another podcast. I'm sorry. It fits into the discussion now. And it was amazing. The art was amazing. The story is amazing. Death realizing, maybe I need to get back to my job. Mort realizing, like, maybe I could be good at this. Incredibly humorous, incredibly wise, great stuff. So you can tell, I think, because Death figures as such an amazing character for Terry, that he thought about Death a lot, clearly. Because his death was so realized, was so well understood, was so insightful. Like the things that Death had to say about life, that's an interesting statement, were really, really, really impactful. They were great. And what I was leading to with this conversation is that he had a documentary that was made as he was getting older. And I think like this is a brutal part of his life, was for a guy who was he's brilliant. Like we're talking, I have no idea in terms of like science. Perhaps he was intelligent in that way, but his emotional intelligence was off the charts. It was incredible. As is like the technical intelligence to craft narratives as well. Like stories are not simple things. Was incredibly like astute, adept, and really, really smart guy. Thinks about death a lot, and is starting to lose his mind. Like he was going to not be able to recall himself, like Alzheimer's or something like that. I can't remember. Again, a simple Google search would bring this up, but I have no person to yell to. And I don't want to interrupt the flow of the podcast as we talk about it now. there's a documentary, I think you can find it on YouTube, and it is him exploring, I can't remember which country, but where euthanasia is permissible, where it's legal to self suicide. And I've always felt like, yeah, I think that that's a humane thing to do, but I liked that you would allow people that dignity. They're like, I'm going to decide when I go, and I could do it in an environment that is better than jumping off a bridge or something like this, you know? And it was interesting, actually. It was really interesting documentary. So he goes to this country, and he goes, they have, he goes to these places where they explain to him the process by which they would end someone's life who wished to do so. And they showed him, like, they have these euthanasia houses. It's like the death house. And you go into the house, and you would go through whatever experience, whatever ritual, whatever word you want to assign to the process that people go through when they decide to euthanize themselves. And it was interesting because he very much at the beginning of the documentary, he was like, yeah, this is fair. I believe going into this, before I know a greater deal about it, that I would support somebody's choice to do this. And it wasn't yet determined, though, whether he might want to do it himself. So I was thinking of saying this at the end of what I would now say, but I'll say it at the start. So he was considering doing it because when he thought about the end of his life and the impact that it would have on people, because he was losing his mind, right? And this is a person whose their most valuable asset is their mind. You might say that for all of us, but maybe especially so for him. I'll give him that in this case. And the thought of losing that loss, I think he saw it as well as a loss of dignity. Like, I'm going to become a mumbling idiot, and if I am to end, I would like to end as I am now, not as that degraded version of myself. And also he had concerns as it related to his wife, because he didn't want his wife to have to look after him when he was devolving into this worser and worser state. So these were things that I could understand why he would care about, why he would be interested in the potential of doing this. And so he goes and he does the whole thing, and at the end he concludes, after getting educated on it, seeing the places that they do it, having an open mind to everything, that for him it wouldn't make sense. I was like, yeah, that's interesting. It's like, it seems like a good idea, but when you get close to that moment, I could see myself on the euthanasia day. I'd be like, one moment. Like, even if that was like really what you had set out to do. I think that is, this is weird. Yeah, I was like, boom, this immediately sparked something in my head. It reminded me of, people often see suicide as an act of cowardice, is just like getting out and escaping. But the movie Cloud Atlas, actually, it talks about this idea as well. Cloud Atlas, one of my all-time favorite movies, where it talks about how it's actually an incredibly brave act. And I think that's true. Like, if you are not in a state of pain to want to end your life, whew, that takes a serious act of will, I would think. So for somebody in this case who, if you are going to euthanize and you want to do it before you reach this mental state that you're afraid of, you're essentially ending a perfectly good day for yourself. So I don't know if I would want to do that. So it was really, really interesting to see his take on it, for a guy who had so much intelligent to say on the subject of death, then to explore this idea of euthanasia and to determine for himself that it was not for him in the end. I want to tell like one more uplifting story about him, because it would, like, what a life. Actually, two things I could mention before. I don't know what the hell we move on to after this, but we'll find something. So it was that as he was finishing, he never stopped writing, and he kept doing it to the very last moment that he possibly could. He eventually got to the point where he couldn't like do it himself physically, and so he would dictate to someone who would write for him. I want to read all of his books. There's 40 of them. I've read a few. I don't need to like number drop or whatever, but I've gone through a few. But there's still tons more that I could read, and I'd be curious because, of course, writing is a reflection of a person's soul. As it moved to the later period of his life, what did his writing become like? Was it just as vital as when he first began, or had it taken on a different tone by that point? It would be really, really interesting to check that out. So what else is going on? I mean, I think about it, I've been like really good active recently. That was something today where I felt like almost as though maybe overactive, but no. I still went to the gym today. It was good. I'm excited for, I was talking about going home. That was like a really, really cool thing that I'm going to get to do. Still deciding on exactly when I will do that. I think almost definitely now it's going to be in November, which is really, really exciting. All of the things like I was talking about on my list of to do was really, really cool. In terms of what I've accomplished recently, like day after day after day. Once I finish this podcast, I will make another list and get through that. Tomorrow, that's something I could talk about, which is really cool. I've got a trip planned to Tokyo for just one night. I haven't been to Tokyo in several years, which is crazy because I would kind of semi-frequently go there. I'm going to meet a friend. We're going to do a photo shoot. That should... Yeah, I think that'll show up on my Instagram. That'll be more content. I'll be like just generally shooting out there. I made leaps and strides with the camera, getting to a little bit of like nerdy tech stuff here. Basically, now that I've done the research on this R5C, the thing that stuck out to me immediately was horrendous battery life. And there's the R5, which is the model previous to this, and now the one that I have, the R5C. And I thought, when I asked my friend, what are your record times like? And he told me, I thought, why are yours so much better when this is not so dissimilar? And it has to do with the operating system and the way that this camera, whether you're recording at a lower frame rate or a higher frame rate, charges through the battery. And I figured it out. So at first I was worried because I thought, have I gotten a faulty camera? Like, it doesn't make any sense how quickly it's going through these batteries. But no, that's just normal. And since this is like the third time I'll have mentioned Sandro, but Sandro being awesome, there are battery grips that you can get for this, and he has lent me it for the time being. I'll probably see if I can purchase it off of him. Allows you to put 2 batteries in, and I've discovered that so long as you lower the frame rate, you double your recording time. Now, I'm going to want to record in high frame rates quite often, but with the battery pack doubled up and knowing that I should only have it sitting on that setting for as long as I'm going to record in high frame rate, and then as soon as I'm done, bump it back down or turn the camera off, has meant that I have a workaround. And that's always what happens with these things. Like, I do enjoy, although it would be nice for a camera to be perfect, I do enjoy the sort of eccentricities that they have, and they all have them. Like, the previous one that I had, or have still, although I'll be giving that away shortly, it was this thing with a rolling shutter, which was basically, that means that if you did a sharp pan left or pan right, it warps the top and the bottom as though they're slipping, and then they slide diagonally. It was a big problem with the previous camera. They fixed it in the Sony a7S III, but not in the one that I had. But it was personality, you know. I was like, I'm just moving through these things. It's probably proportional to my skill set, which is fine. Man, okay, cool. Chilled out. I got like things flowing into my head here. Something to talk about that I love so much. The seasons in Japan. So that was another reason, like figuring out what it is that I would do in terms of the visit back to Canada was, okay, I think I'm going to do this. So now when do I go? And then I thought, basically, if you return to Vancouver, like maybe second week of September and onwards, it's basically varying degrees of rain and gloominess. Now, I haven't been back for ages, so I think that would actually be endearing. I miss that rain and gloominess, to be completely honest. For a short period of time, I think it'll wear out its welcome in the time that it takes me to return. But not so in Japan. I mean, the summers here are brutal, absolutely brutal. Although this Kyoto summer seems to have not been that bad. But September, October in Japan is perhaps my favorite months in Japan, because it's still warm. Like, you look outside now, beautiful sunny day, little bit of a cooler breeze now, because it's, as I say, it's gone through that second portion of the month. You know, what is it now? It's 16th. And then October, it's just the same. It gets more golden, it gets more crisp. You can see this sort of like late summer where it's like things are still beautiful and green, but the leaves are collecting on the sidewalk already. And I love that. It's one of the best times. This is this thing I was talking to Drew about this, the other good friend, shows up all the time in the stuff that we do. Talking about what am I going to lose it now? It was to do with the weather. Oh no, it has to do with the weather. We were talking about like really like notable elements in the season. Anyways, it'll return to me. We have done some incredible hikes during that time. Oh, I remember. Good. Don't focus on it. It'll come back in. Camping. So seasonally, people I think about camping differently depending on the country that you're in. Big time. So in Canada, it's summer camping. That's when you would go. If you go camping in summer in Vancouver, bliss, heaven, sublime, euphoric, amazing. It's so good. But if you go camping in summer here in Japan, it's either like insanely humid, or you're going to have a rainy season to contend with. So it's very, very rainy. It ends up being then that if you go camping here, camping in the fall is amazing. And you get the added benefit of there's no mosquitoes, there's no bugs or anything. I went last year. I made a video about it on my channel. It was such an amazing weekend. I went more north again, past Tokyo, to visit my buddy Phil, who was a great friend that I had made from the last teaching job that I was at. And it was, I don't know, heaven on earth it's a real thing. It is a real thing sometimes. We camped next to this river. He has like all this cool setup because it's something he's very passionate about. I'm just kind of tagging along with whatever like bare minimum gear that I have. But yeah, camp next to the river, gorgeous. You could still go swimming in it, and it's like crisp and beautiful. I'd gotten apocalyptically drunk the year previous that we did it. And I like crawled out of my tent in the morning, like desiccated, dry, crawled down to the river and went in. Never made such poor decisions this time, and woke up actually feeling pretty good, but did lots of swimming, such good food. We got some like massive thing of beer, which was great. Rolling tobacco, smoking less and less these days, which is good. But like some drum or whatever, rolling tobacco, sitting next to a river with your buddies, just having a yarn, having a chin waggle. Ooh. It's something that I enjoy most in this world. And Japan, for that, is incredible during the fall. So I have no plans currently for any camping trips, but it's something that I would be definitely down for. Our buddy... Oh, this I could talk about. So this was so cool. Our buddy just had his birthday. Mihao had his birthday. Happy birthday, buddy, again. And what we did is not so far from here. It's like 20, 30 minutes on the train. There is an amusement park. And I haven't been to an amusement park in decades. And for a return ticket on the train, it was $18. And then to actually get unlimited rides at the place, it was $30, roughly, 30. It was so much fun. Like I could tell, like we got on the first roller coaster, and as soon as we were going around, I was like, oh, this is going to be a fantastic day. We were calling it, theme park energy, where there's just a sort of, as soon as you bought into behaving like a child again, and it didn't feel artificial or forced. We had a riot. We had a laugh riot. One of the most fun things that we did was, I've never been on one of these towers that you it's just a tower, and then you sit there, and then it goes to the top, and then it just drops like crazy fast. Oh, that's going to be super loud in the mic. Whoops. I've never done that before, and it was a rush, an absolute rush. We did have this kind of funny thing where we like walked down from that section though into this other area, and we're laughing and having a great time, but we didn't really notice that the nature of the rides changed a little bit. They became a little more immature at that point. It was totally fine, but we were down there for a bit, and then like, you know what? Maybe this is a little too infantile for us. Let's go back up this way to more of the roller coasters and stuff like that. But it was hilarious. It was like this goofy group of foreigners, like 4 like mid-30s foreigners, and then just families with their children. But hey, there's being mature, and then there's being able to enjoy life, and I think we most certainly did that. It was great, and we got perfect weather for it. It was a little foreboding in terms of was it going to rain that day, but we totally lucked out. We were going to go camping for Mihaw's birthday, but that was the concern. It was that if we go camping, it could really dump on us. It could rain, and so maybe better to do something that if we do need to run for cover, we can. And it was another opportunity to take the camera out of the shed and snap a bunch with it, get more used to it, and I got some wicked shots of the guys there. It was fantastic. Drew and I were taking turns like doing dad duty. Perhaps myself a little less than him. I was jumping on a few more rides, but whoever was not on the ride, they'd grab the camera and they'd snap shots and just add to the whole experience. It was so much fun. When I was young, and this is tied for me to like childhood experiences where great respect for my father. He's a good man, and he was a great dad when I was growing up. And one of the things that we would do, so I'm originally from Vancouver Island, and then in Vancouver there was each year, it would only be set up for a period of time in the summer. Makes sense with all the gloom and the rain otherwise. It's called Playland. And Playland, for an event space, an amusement park that was only set up for the summer, was awesome. It was really good. I think it had like it was kind of cool, just like this place that we went to in Hirakata. It had a wooden roller coaster. Playland has like a record for the oldest wooden roller coaster on like the West Coast or in Canada or whatever, but it's like this ancient wooden roller coaster that was awesome. So much fun. And almost every single year when we got old enough, my dad would take us there, and it would be this amazing trip where we would take the ferry. The ferry in itself is this incredible thing. I look forward to riding that as well when I go back this summer, where you're just riding through the most picturesque, beautiful archipelago of islands that you have ever seen in your life, with fir and pine and spruce and West Coast rainforest, incredible views. And we would take the ferry over. Also, I loved on the ferry, they would have the arcades, and I would play games on the PC at home because my dad was a programmer, and that was very much a part of my youth, which I loved, was the march of game technology. The arcades had different games than would be on the PC, and they at first progressed more quickly than the PC did. The PC would eventually catch up and then surpass, and now become sort of the benchmark of us pushing what is capable graphically, in terms of games, but it wasn't always like that. And so you get on the ferry, and I would get the quite infamous, if you've ever heard of it before, in Canada we have like $1, but then we have the $2, we have the toonie, we have the loonie, that's the $1, and then we have the toonie. And the toonie, I'd get my $2, and that would, that's 8 quarters. And some games are 25 cents, some games are 50 cents, but I would like, that was pure crack for me. I loved those games on the ferry. Maybe get a culinary institution also on the West Coast is White Spot, and they are the type of food that you get on the ferry. It's their burgers, and they're so delicious. I realize now how insanely unhealthy they are as well, but they're so good. My mouth is watering now. I've had a protein shake and an apple. I got to make some lunch at some point here. I love those ferry rides. I loved going over to Playland. I loved getting older. Like, I have specific memories of the year. They would always have in Playland a section of it that was dedicated to basically console technology. It wasn't always there, but then it started to become popular. Like the Sega Genesis is released. There was a Nintendo section, and then finally, I remember when the N64 was released, and that was a huge step. Like Mario 64, I mean, people still play that now and have a blast with it. I remember going into like the huge tent that it was in, and like N64, like Mario's up on the big screen, and being in complete awe of what life was and what was coming, and all this limitless potential and hope I had for the future. And so doing this with my dad and my brothers, incredible, like pure joy as only a child can feel. And now to be able to come back for my buddy's birthday and go to a theme park again was something unexpectedly wonderful that, yeah, I haven't done in so long, and was so much fun. I don't know if when we'll go again. I don't know when we'll go again, but I think we enjoyed it so much that it's definitely now on the table. If we're like, what could be a cool thing? We'll all have fun. It's not too expensive, and we can spend a day laughing and just being silly idiots. I think it's definitely on the menu now. Mihao had been there like a couple of times and just said that he had a really good time with it. And so I was like, yeah. This is cool. I like this. Any other events? I've told you about like going into Tokyo. That was cool. I would really like to, let's go pure tangent here. Something that I used to do back in Canada was, what is it? Oh man, I can't even remember the name of the sport. I was like racket, hit, ball, squash. That's what it is. I even had these like fancy shoes that when I used to play at the YMCA in Vancouver that I got because we played all the time. You want to melt the bacon, you want to sizzle the bacon off of your body, you play a little bit of squash. And we found that there are courts which are not so far. If you go a little bit south from where I am now, you can find some courts there. It's so golden now. It's so incredible. I think I should be taking more walks along the Kamogawa River at this time, but with the how determined I am to make sure that things keep on coming out of the content channels. Creative production is the priority right now. And that's the last note that I'll end on, actually, is to talk about I've been working on it for several days because I've been committed and focused. This is the same group of friends that went and did this journey. We went to this place called Otokoyama, which is like Man Mountain, Otoko. And it's dedicated to, I think, Nobunaga? I think. I've made this mistake before. Anyways, it's one of these amazing places, like beautiful. You have to like hike up this mountain to get there, that is in the proximity of Kyoto, but nobody ever talks about it. And it's amazing. It was like incredibly peaceful, incredibly colorful and bright, like strong. There was like this sense of strength, which I think for who it is dedicated to makes sense. And it will be one of the last videos that goes up on my channel where I was filming with the previous camera, and it's coming along. I don't want to spoil the song that I chose for it, but it was like, since this was such a joyous day out with friends, like so much of the footage I hope for people is simply uplifting, because I'm kind of the ghost behind the camera, except for like I think 1 or 2 clips where I appear when we're praying at the temple, so you won't see me that much in it. But it was just the most fun, euphoric day with friends, and the song that I found for that, I think, really reflects that. So I'm really excited. I don't know if I can finish it today. There's a significant amount of work to still be done on it. I've done so much and it's progressed so far, but saying you've progressed so far doesn't say that you're near finished yet, right? So I've got to just keep with my head down. I'll do this podcast. I'll do a bunch of other sort of social media stuff. I got a blog post that will go up today. So if you're interested, you may have read that blog post by the time that you're listening to this or watching this. But a lot to do, and really, really excited for the video. And then I've got one more video that will be, actually, it's kind of funny. It's taken me a year to get this thing up again. That's how crazy it's been. There is this other place that is not so often talked about when I talk to people about cool places to go, where I went for a hike with this other group of friends called Hozikyo, and it has, when I filmed this, I just put it on auto, so I have not oversaturated the colors or anything. It is just that Japan's fall is this vivid. It was stunning. It was a stunner. Thank you so much for listening. As I said at the beginning, I thank them at the beginning. I'll thank them at the end. Thank you to my patrons who support me. Please do consider supporting me if you're enjoying what we're doing here on the podcast. I will, on the YouTube channel, have put all my social media across the bottom of the podcast. So if you want to get a contact to me, if you want to check out what I'm doing on Instagram, my Patreon, blah, 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 it's all there. And I hope that you're well. I hope wherever you find yourself listening to this in the world, that you and your family are safe from harm and that you're aspiring to great things. That's all for this one. I'll catch you in episode 62.